welcome back to another episode of Principles of Micro. Today we are in Chapter 11, looking at price discrimination. So, before you get all upset about discrimination, make sure you listen to, first of all, what is the definition of price discrimination, and also look at what its implications are for social welfare. So we'll define it, and then we'll look at what it does to total surplus, that is the sum of consumer surplus and producer surplus, which we learned about in earlier chapters. Now there are three kinds of price discrimination. Your book does not really go into much detail about the three kinds. So the first kind is what's called perfect price discrimination, or first degree price discrimination. Then there's second degree, which is also known as bundling. You're surely familiar with bundling quite a bit. You probably saw some deal at the store where if you buy one, you get the next one 50% off. That's actually a form of price discrimination. Even though it's got the word discrimination in there, no one gets too upset about that. And lastly, there is third degree price discrimination. So, what does it mean when we say price discrimination? A firm can charge different prices to different customers. So you guys are actually quite familiar with one example of price discrimination. That's college tuition. So while the tuition might be similar for a lot of students, you get very different amounts of financial aid. So the price you pay net of financial aid is actually going to be quite different for many of you guys. So you're paying different rates depending upon what your ability to pay is. The students who have a wealthier family tend to pay higher tuition because they get less financial aid, while the poorer students who come from less advantaged backgrounds tend to get more financial aid and end up paying less. So that's a form of price discrimination, but you might argue makes things more fair rather than less fair. So there are a couple of conditions that have to be satisfied in order for price discrimination to be possible. First of all, the firm must be able to tell apart different kinds of groups of consumers. They got to be able to sort out who has a greater ability to pay or a greater willingness to pay from who has a lower willingness to pay. The firm also has to have market power. Remember we said what that was about earlier. Market power is the ability to set prices. The opposite was when you have perfect competition, where the firm has no ability to influence price. So if you have perfect competition and you try to price discriminate, then the other firms out there are going to offer a lower price to the consumers you're trying to charge more. Those consumers end up going to your rivals and you'll lose business. So you have to have, at the very least, market power. Probably you need a monopoly in order to make this work in many cases. Again, otherwise if you don't have a monopoly, then your rivals can just reduce their prices below yours and take away all your business. The third condition is that you have to be able to stop resale of the goods. If that were not possible, if the goods could be resold, then the folks you're trying to charge the low price to will buy it at the low price, and they'll just resell it to people you're trying to charge the high price to. So no one's going to pay the high price to you if they just buy it from someone else. So college tuition satisfies all these conditions. We use that as our example of price discrimination. You can't resell your college tuition. If you get accepted into Binghamton University, you can't sell your seat to somebody else. So resale has been prohibited. There is market power. There's only a handful of state universities, so they have ability to set prices. Now there are some private schools and you could go out of state, but that's a lot more expensive. Therefore, unless you're pretty well off, you're limited to a handful of state schools for where you're going to go for college. So the state schools end up having substantial market power. College students are also distinguishable in groups. They can they find out a lot of information about what you're willing to pay. They ask you a lot about that on the financial aid forms, so they can separate who has more income and who is more able to pay from who has less income and less ability to pay. So college tuition works out very, very nicely as an example of price discrimination. All the conditions are satisfied very well. So I mentioned in my introduction that bundling was an example of price discrimination. So those deals where if you buy one, you get the second unit 50% off. So this means a discount for buying in bulk. So here's how that can be a form of price discrimination. Maybe if you buy a 1 pound bag of rice, it only costs you $1. If you buy a 5 pound bag, it's probably not going to cost $5. They might give you some kind of discount, like the 5 pound bag costs $4. So if you're buying the 1 pound bag, you're paying $1 per pound. If you're buying the 5 pound bag, 4 over 5 is 80 cents, so you're paying 80 cents per pound. So the person who's buying in bulk is paying a lower price per pound than someone who is buying a smaller quantity. So you can see that different consumers are paying different rates, so that's a form of price discrimination. Again, you guys probably got upset when you heard about the word discrimination in our title, but this practice where you get a discount for buying in bulk probably has not upset a whole lot of people. There are also senior discounts. You might see it at a movie theater or something like that. So they know that retirees, when they've quit their job and they rely upon Social Security, they don't have as much income as people who are young or middle-aged. As a result, they're probably not going to have the same ability to pay as most other people. Thus, in order to get them to purchase or go to the movie theater and stuff like that, the firms offer them a discount. And sometimes college students get discounts for a lot of stuff because they realize that you guys have a lower ability to pay than most other people do. Airlines are another example of price discrimination. They realize that not everyone is equally sensitive to price. So some people who care a lot about price are going to say, I'm going for the cheapest flight no matter what time of day it is. And they could take flights that leave at hours like 5 a.m. or something ridiculously early, where most of us would much rather be still asleep at that time. So people who are all about price, and they want the cheapest flight, they can get the early flights, and the airlines price the early flights at these lower prices so that they can lure in the people who have the lowest willingness to pay. Now, people who are not quite so price sensitive, who value their sleep more, they are going to prefer flights that are later in the day, and they end up paying more. That's how the airlines separate people into two groups based on their willingness to pay. So, low willingness to pay, they get the flights that are really, really early in the morning or very, very late at night. And higher willingness to pay, the people who want their sleep, they get the flights that are at a more convenient time, but they pay more. Another example, coupons. So, coupons are available to just about anyone. You just go through your mail and clip the coupons you want. Now, the idea though is that it's rather inconvenient. It's time consuming to clip coupons. So to go sort through all that mail you get and find out which coupons are applicable for which times and for what kind of goods you're buying, that takes time. Now, if you have a low ability to pay and low willingness to pay, then you think that's worthwhile. So someone who's low income, for example, they might take the time to go and do that. Someone who is more well off might think that, yeah, I could get a discount if I go look through coupons, but I think my time is more valuable in that I'm not willing to go through all that extra trouble. So as a result, the people who have the low income and low willingness to pay end up getting a discount because of the coupons, while people who have a higher willingness to pay, higher income, end up paying the full price. So here's a story about how this worked out when I was living in the Northwest. I went to the University of Oregon for grad school. I grew up in Washington State, did my undergrad in Washington State. So a big grocery store out there is Safeway. They wanted to go into the digital age and make things all electronic and convenient. So you didn't clip physical coupons anymore. Instead, you got the Safeway Club card, and all the discounts were on the card. You swipe the card, and you get the coupon discount. So that makes things very easy and convenient. So that ends up actually defeating the purpose of having coupons. So now people who have a high ability to pay, who care about the time quite a bit, still find it very easy to get discounts. So now you can't separate consumers into low willingness to pay and high willingness to pay anymore. Paradoxically, making something less convenient by requiring people to show physical coupons makes things better. I'll go back to airlines again for yet another example. So the most convenient time to fly for most of us is the weekend or Friday and Monday. Most workers get the weekend off, so if you leave on a Friday or you leave on Saturday morning and come back on Monday, you miss very little work. As a result, the ticket prices on Friday through Monday tend to be substantially higher than they are during the rest of the week. For most of us, it's not very convenient to fly out on a Tuesday or a Wednesday because they end up missing half a week of work. So people who are very price sensitive can fly during Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they get a discount for that. The people who have a high willingness to pay and value convenience more end up paying the higher fares on Friday through Monday. So that's a bunch of examples of price discrimination. We'll stop our episode here, and when we come back, our next episode is going to be about first degree price discrimination, also called perfect price discrimination.